A little slow tonight, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
This how they do New Year's in Chamberlain, Maine, huh? Count down the hours, count down the minutes, count down the seconds.
Women can't live with them, can't live without them.
Came here on a lark, if you can believe it, Lloyd. Was back in the City of Angels, going a little buddy-duddy in the old noggin. Writer's block. Ought to be classified as a full-blown disease if you want to know the truth of the matter. So I hitchhike across the country to see if I can cure myself of it. Between you, me, and the bedpost, Lloyd, by God, I think I did. There's an author, not gonna divulge who, he's too big-time famous. He had a magical typewriter, I think, was the secret to all his success. I say had because, well, Lloyd, I snuck onto his property, I dug through his trash, and I stole that damn thing right out from under him. Right from his trash. He threw it away, if you can believe it. Why on God's great green and blue marble would he do such a thing, huh, Lloyd? Unless, I don't know, it was haunted or cursed or something. Stephen King, that's the author.
What would be?
I'm awfully glad you asked me that, Lloyd, because I just happen to have 2 20s and 2 10s right here in my wallet. I was afraid they were gonna be there till next April. Hell, by next April, I'll probably still be stuck here in the deep south of the far north they call the state of Maine, still talking about Carrie.
Women can't live with them, can't
So
live.
here's what. You slip me a bottle of bourbon, a little glass, and some ice. You can do that, can't you, Lloyd? You're not too busy, are you?
No, sir, not busy at all.
Good man. You set 'em up and I'll knock 'em back, Lloyd, one by one. Say, Lloyd, seems temporarily light. Would you look at that? My great-grandma and pa on my dad's side, old Dilfred and Dilfred McCracken. 1922. And here we are, about to wrap up 2022, 100 years later. How's my credit in this joint anyway?
Your credit's fine.
I like you, Lloyd. I always liked you. You're always the best of them. Best goddamn bartender from Timbuktu to Portland, Maine. Or Portland, Oregon, for that matter.
Thank you for saying so.
Yeah, well, I guess I should probably go mix it up with the locals, seeing as how I'll be stuck here doing this Carrie song and dance a while, huh?
Women can't live with them.
Yeah. Be seeing you around, Lloyd, my man.
Why we have to waste precious time and money on such trivialities?
Well, dear, it's for memories, for our children and our children's children.
All done here, ma'am. Sir?
About damn time. Baby Fred's gonna be just parched for his mama's milk.
Your bill, sir.
Only thing tougher in these times we live in are them teats. Giving off nothing but sour milk these days.
Another rejection. You could just about paper the walls with all them rejection letters. Imagine that! Rejection letters that's better written than the very writing they're rejecting.
Dear Lord, I know I may not be the best writer, but what I lack in talent, you gave me in hard-hearted determination. Now, I may not get the words right perfectly all the time, but by God, I get them down and turned in on time. Anyway, I've just got something in my way. I don't know. Maybe you've got some sign or something you're cooking up there, something to help me get out of this rut I'm in. Night, night, Lord Almighty.
What, you think just 'cause the rooster died you can sleep all day? Wake up, you deadbeat son of a bitch! I'm going into town today to buy myself a brand new dress. I trust you can take care of baby Fred for a few hours. You can do that one thing right, can't you?
God, grant me the strength.
Well, can't you?
Yes, Darlette, I can take care of our baby son while you're gone.
Reverend Henry's taking me, actually. You know him, he's the handsome one down at First Methodist. Well, there's two handsome ones, actually. But he's the most handsome. Did you know reverends can get married nowadays?
I did not know that.
Oh, they can. Kind he is, anyway. Told me so himself. He told me, good Lord wants a man to enjoy the pleasures of the flesh.
Darlette, why are you telling me all this stuff?
Oh, that's my reverend!
Full dark, no stars. As I read this strange book that magically appeared, I realize that although it is written about my time, here in the year of our Lord 1922, it is written from a time many years in my future. I am like a sponge, somehow absorbing not only this work of fiction, but all the knowledge of this man and his works. I glimpse my great-grandson, who would one day host a web series about this remarkable man, Stephen King. I can no more finish asking questions like, what is a web series? Before these gaps in my brain are instantly filled in. The knowledge of my great-grandson becomes my knowledge. And as he counts down the seconds to a year I can only assume is rife with flying cars and food that comes in pill form.
Go see a Star
That
Wars.
glorious year 2022, I sit in my farmhouse in 1922, caring for my infant son, who will one day become my great-grandson's grandfather, reading a book that will not exist for another 88 years, written by a man who will not be born for another 25. 100 years between me and my great-grandson as we swim in this cosmic gumbo we call existence. Well, hello there. Welcome to the Stephen Kingdom. While my great-grandson, David McCracken, takes you all on a journey through Stephen King's first published novel, Carrie, I, Dilfred J. McCracken, will take you folks on a journey of my own through a collection of 4 nasty novellas by Stephen King, published November the 5th, 2010, called Full Dark, No Stars, which contains the novellas 1922, Big Driver, Fair Extension, and A Good Marriage. So perhaps it's no coincidence that the first novella, titled 1922, contains a story that oddly parallels my own. It is the story of a Nebraska farmer at the end of his rope, driven so mad by his loathsome wife that he is given no choice but to murder her and toss her corpse down a well, where the rats can feed upon her day in and day out, night and day, until there's nothing left of her but rotten, rat-gnawed bones. But I'd never dream of doing that to my own wife, my dearest Darlette. I don't own a well. The novella 1922 is firmly rooted in the grand tradition of stories wherein a character's evil deed leads to such overwhelming guilt and shame that it drives them to madness. Edgar Allan Poe's The Telltale Heart, Toni Morrison's Beloved, H.P. Lovecraft's The Rats and the Walls, Fyodor Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, Nathaniel Hawthorne's The Scarlet Letter, and Macbeth by
What's the matter, smartass? You don't know any fucking Shakespeare?
The story of 1922 takes the form of a confession letter written at the Magnolia Hotel in Omaha, Nebraska on the 11th of April, 1930. And what we get from the outset pretty much tells us all we need to know to get this nasty little tale off and running. To whom it may concern, my name is Wilfred Leland James, and this is my confession. In June of 1922, I murdered my wife, Arlette Christina Winters James, and hid her body by tupping it down an old well. My son, Henry Freeman James, aided me in this crime, although at 14, he was not responsible. I cozened him into it, playing upon his fears and beating down his quite normal objections over a period of 2 months. This is a thing I regret, even more bitterly than the crime, for reasons this document will show. Wilf's wife wants to sell their land for cash. Cash! And move to the big city. Now imagine, sell off his father's farm. His father's before him. Now I know what you're thinking. Dilfred, don't you go taking sides with a murderer.
I just had to kill a lot of people.
Now, I ain't taking sides. But here's the thing. In 1922, Stephen King employs a strict, limited, first-person point of view. After all, the whole novella takes the form of Wilfred's confession letter. As such, all the events in 1922 are Wilfred's version of said events, which means there could be a whole other version of this story told from his son Henry's point of view, or heck, Arlette's, before she gets done in by old Will. That'd be a pretty short story indeed. Now, when writers employ this kind of limited perspective, we as readers best keep our antenna up, because character is by their very nature unreliable. And when you have a character like Wilfred Leland James, someone who commits such a heinous act and spends the rest of the story tangling and twisting himself up in lies and deceptions to cover it all up, well, best keep a character like that at arm's length. Critic Terence Rafferty of the New York Times opines, there's a particularly intimate sense of horror in 1922 because the sad story is told in the voice of one of the afflicted. Not much, I'd guess, truly scares Stephen King, but in this tale, his prose feels haunted, as if he had for once spooked himself. Stephen King spooking himself. Imagine that, the king of horror. Just the idea of Stephen King spooking himself, well, that spooks me. Boo! Even more problematic with Wilfred is that he makes us feel like we can trust him. I mean, the form of the story is a confessional after all. Hell, that word confession, it's in the first line of the damn story. Now, Wilfred lets us glimpse his darkest thoughts and schemes, but he's also candid about knowing full well the depths of his dark deeds. Except, Stephen King ain't content to make Wilfred an all cards on the table kind of guy. Sure. Wilfred wants us to think he's an open book. Hell, there's every indication that he truly believes what he's telling us is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help him God. But he's got a big old blind spot. And that blind spot is what Wilfred calls the conniving man. I believe that there is another man inside of every man, a stranger. A conniving man. And I believe that by March of 1922, when the Hemingford County skies were white and every field was a snow-scrimmed mudsuck, the conniving man inside Farmer Wilfred James had already passed judgment on my wife and decided her fate. It was justice in the black cat variety, too. The Bible says that an ungrateful child is like a serpent's tooth. Nagging an ungrateful wife is ever so much sharper than that. I'm not a monster. I tried to save her from the conniving man. And if there's one person we can trust, it's a man who maintains he's not a monster. I'm not a monster.
Dilfy! Put your pecker away! Mama's home with a vengeance.
The conniving man. Save her from the conniving man. Here, Wilfred is having it both ways. Kinda sorta taking responsibility for his dark deeds, but kinda sorta not. And I'd argue that with Wilfred's invention of the conniving man, he's given up the ghost, admitting his guilt even though he don't know it. Because what does the word conniving connotate to you, O constant watcher? Well, to me, to humble old Dilfred, to be conniving requires at the very least two qualities: patience and intelligence. And Wilfred has both those traits in spades. First, there's Wilfred's patience. After he murders Arlette and throws her body down the well, her lawyer shows up at the farm. Until Arlette is found, Wilfred says she's plumb run off. The lawyer warns Wilfred not to touch her share of the land, especially because that land could be mighty valuable if sold to the local slaughterhouse. What I wanted to say was, no, it's not mine. But it's not yours either. It's just going to sit there. And that's all right, because it will be mine in 7 years when I go to court to have her declared legally dead. I can wait. 7 years without smelling pig shit when the wind's out of the west. 7 years without hearing the screams of dying hogs. So much like the screams of a dying woman. Seeing their intestines float down a creek that's red with blood. That sounds like an excellent 7 years to me. And then there's Wilfred's cows. Now, throughout the novella, Wilfred's manner of speech indicates he's a pretty educated man, especially for a rural Nebraskan farmer in the 1920s. He even boasts about being an avid reader to Arlette's lawyer. But it's Wilfred's cows that really show his intelligence. I named all our cows after minor Greek goddesses. But Elphys turned out to be either a bad choice or an ironic joke. In case you don't remember the story of how evil came to our sad old world, let me refresh. All the bad things flew out when Pandora gave in to her curiosity and opened the jar that had been left in her kingdom. The only thing that remained when she regained enough wits to put the lid back on was Elphys, the goddess of hope. But in that summer of 1922, there was no hope left for our Elphys. Elphys meets a tragic end when she tumbles down the well and lands on top of Arlette's corpse. Elphys breaks her neck in the fall, writhing and kicking, one of her hooves cracking Arlette's jaw. Wilfred takes aim and pow! Puts poor old Elphys out of her misery. And Elphys isn't the only craftily named cow. There's Pheminoe, named after a Greek poet and inventor of the hexameter verse. That's a type of poetic meter considered to be the most grandiose of all poetic meters, and is often nicknamed the heroic hexameter, or the meter of the epic. Pretty fitting, I'd say, considering it's the style used in such epic poetry as Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, and Virgil's Aeneid, and Ovid's Metamorphoses. Now, Pheminoe was a daughter of Apollo and his first priestess at Delphi. All you students of Greek mythology out there will recognize Delphi as the location of the Temple of Apollo, where the infamous Oracle of Delphi resided. Folks from all over the world would flock to her, seeking her advice. Not unlike Neo from the Matrix. Whoa! Whoa, whoa!
The Oracle will see you now.
You know what that means? It's Latin. Means know thyself.
Know thyself was inscribed over the entrance to the Temple of Apollo. And it's a saying sometimes attributed to, you guessed it, Pheminoe. the daughter of Apollo, not Wilfred's cow. I have a feeling if the cow had had a hand in the inscription, it would have said something like, moo moo moo, moo. Moo. With one tossed-off cow name, Stephen King gets a nice nod in the craft of writing, an opportunity he never passes up on. And he ties the name of the goddess and the cow to Wilfred himself. Know thyself. See, Wilfred thinks he knows himself, but does he really? Can he really? Well, I'd argue no, not as long as he's so eager to pin his sins on the conniving man. Well, the third eponymously named cow that Stephen King runs through the ringer is Achelous, a lunar goddess whose name means she who drives away pain. And with a name like this, the etymology of which Wilfred even points out to us, the humble readers, you just know this poor cow is going to meet a doomed end. And so she does. See, after Wilfred's life has fallen apart and is in shambles, she ends up living in the house with him before galloping off the porch and breaking both front legs. Wilfred muses. Not even a blameless cow could survive around me, it seemed. I went outside, patted Achelous on the head. She stretched her neck up and lowed plaintively, "Make it stop. You're the master, you're the god of my world, so make it stop." I did. Happy New Year.
What did you call me? Something about a blameless cow?
No, I didn't.
If I'm a blameless cow, better call Reverend Henry O. MacDonald. He took the deprived cow out to pasture, if you know what I mean.
I do know what you mean, Darlette, but I do not think you mean what you think you mean. I think you are misusing the colloquialism.
Coliseum?
Colloquialism. Colloquialism.
You think just 'cause you use your fancy $5 words, you're any kind of writer? Only kind of writer you are is the unemployed kind. What's this? Stephen King, Full Dark No Stars? Ain't never heard of him.
You wouldn't have.
You read trash, you write trash, you are trash.
I'm not a monster. I tried to save her from the conniving man.
Dilfred, are you still talking?
No. Now, where was I? Oh yes, a Greek goddess named Cows. So before Achelous meets her pathetic end, she lives a tortured existence involving Stephen King's #1 go-to gross-out critter, rats. Whatever that could be.
Oi there!
What the?
Invite me in, won't you?
Crispy. Okay. Oh, so your name? Bit macabre, huh? Crispy Rat?
It's pronounced Chris Pratt. My mother was a big fan of that actor's work. May she rest in peace.
I'm not familiar with him or his work.
I come as an ambassador to ensure that all rat-centric information on your Stephen King show is portrayed accurately and responsibly. Our image has been tarnished over the years by your human media. We rats consider Stephen King to be an unfortunate nuisance, always casting us as nasty, loathsome creatures. Don't believe me? Roll that clip!
Why rats? Because rats are nasty. Rats are scary.
If a rat were to scamper through your front door right now, would you greet it with hostility?
I suppose I would.
Has a rat ever done anything to you to create this animosity you feel toward them?
It's a rat!
Did you say they're rats?
Got this rat. Annoying, eating
Subway rats you gotta worry about. Big as beavers.
I love rats more than pigs.
Slow roast or fillet and flash fry?
I'm gonna throw up.
hates rats. He's scared to death of them.
A rat may taste like pumpkin pie, but I'd never know because I wouldn't eat the filthy mother.
It's a nation of rats.
Rat! Just shut up about the rats.
We rats crop up in countless Mr. King works. Heck, in one of his later novella collections, If It Bleeds, there's a novella titled simply Rat, about a rat that offers to get rid of a writer's writer's block in exchange for the life of one of the writer's loved ones. Ha! Too bad that fella didn't find Stephen King's magical typewriter like your great-grandson will 100 years from now.
How do you know about that?
We rats know all. We rats see all. We also subscribe to the Stephen Kingdom YouTube channel.
Do you support the Patreon, though?
Slow your roll there, Dilf. We rats feature most prominently in Mr. King's short story Graveyard Shift, first published in the October 1970 issue of Cavalier magazine, and later included in his first collection of short stories, Night Shift. In Graveyard Shift, some fellas are cleaning out an abandoned textile mill that's so deep underground and so far removed from mankind that an empire of rats has risen. Albino rats, and armored rats, and flying bat rats. It's the Gremlins 2 of rats.
Stephen King got $200 for that story.
He was overpaid. In the novella 1922, though, it's just regular old rats. They start out at the bottom of the well, feeding on the rotting corpse of Wilfred's wife. But soon, like Wilfred's ever-encroaching guilt, psst, the rats are metaphors. The rats get closer and closer, closing in on Wilfred, driving him further into a deepening chasm of madness. One night, in August, Wilfred awakes to a pained moaning in his barn, only to find Achelous the cow with a big, fat rat clinging to her udders with its sharp teeth.
The weight had stretched the pink stub to a taut length of cartilage. Frozen in surprise and horror, I thought of how, as a child, Henry would sometimes pull a string of pink bubble gum out of his mouth.
Okay, Mr. King, we get the picture. You don't like rats.
I write about things that scare me the most. And I think when people ask me, well, what scares you? They expect some sort of big existential answer like death or the idea that there's no afterlife or possibly that there is an afterlife. But really, the things that scare me are the things that scare most people.
Stephen King likes to scare people. For better or worse, we rats scare people. Ergo, Stephen King writes about rats.
One of my favorite scenes in 1922 is where Wilf reaches up under the top shelf of the closet to get his wife's hat box, and there's a big rat crouched on top of it. It bites him, and I just thought, that's awful. It's got to go in the barn.
Mr. King's favorite scene of 1922. A naked as a jaybird Wilfred gets bit by a rat, and barefooted, mind you, stomps the rat to death. Take it away, Dilf.
If you say so. Oh, let's see here. I didn't even remember that I was as naked as the day I was born. Just brought my right foot down on the rat. I heard its bones crunch and felt its gut squash. Shit, I ain't reading this. Take it away, Wilfred reenactor. I want something done right. Blood and liquefied intestines squirted from beneath its tail and doused my left ankle with warmth. The rat twisted and flopped. Its tail first lashed my calf, then wrapped around it like a grass snake. Blood gushed from its mouth. Its black eyes bulged. Its innards reduced to gruel, and still it thrashed and tried to bite. Finally, it stopped moving.
I feel so dead inside. Well, there you have it. To paraphrase a Mr. Forrest Gump, that's all I have to say about rats.
Well, thanks for stopping by, Mr. Rat.
The name's Chris. Chris Pratt.
Long days and pleasant nights.
Back at ya.
Oh. By now, you may be thinking to yourself, oh, is old Dilfred Wilf just gonna read me the whole gall-darn book? Or are we gonna move on to what really matters in life? The movie adaptation. Well, as it just so happens, 3 of the 4 novellas in Full Dark No Stars were adapted into movies, and 1922 is one of them. It took the trifecta of Stephen King, veteran actor Thomas Jane.
I'm Tom Jane.
Australian writer and director Zak Hilditch. And some of that sweet, sweet Netflix money.
Here's money. Go. Make it.
To look at a novella written as a first-person confessional, wherein readers are privy to the innermost, deepest, darkest thoughts and feelings of a disturbed, manipulative individual and say, hey, let's make that into a movie. So make a movie they did, and a pretty faithful one at that. I had a chance to reach out across space and time via cyber telecommunications to pick the brain of 1922's writer and director Zak Hilditch about his experience adapting Stephen King's mean-spirited novella. Well, thank you for taking some time to speak with me today, Mr. Hilditch. Stephen King, what's your first memory of the man, the myth, the legend?
I think I was probably about 11 when the miniseries came out. And of course, that was the end of that. It just blew my mind. It terrified me and my friends. I then started reading it. And as not a book reader at all at that age, like because it was King, it was like, holy shit, I'm going to read this very dense book. And I can't remember how much of it actually seeped in, but I did my best. But yeah, that was my real King origin tale.
Which brings us to Full Dark No Stars and the first novella contained within, 1922. Paint a picture for me. What was your first encounter with this nasty bit of storytelling?
I just stumbled across the cover with the woman who's all contorted and the red Stephen King and just the title, Full Dark No Stars. I was like, that is such a good title. It's such a bleak title. And I opened it up and I was like, all right, I haven't read a King for a while. And first story was 1922 and I read it. And I was like, yeah, Frank Darabont is going to have a field day with this story one day because it just felt like the next Frank Darabont movie. And then I never in a million years thought that I'd be coming back to that story and also being granted the keys to the kingdom to make it, you know?
So, you're writing a screenplay adaptation of a Stephen King novella, knowing full well Stephen King himself will be reading it and giving you his thoughts. Does that affect your writing process at all? I'd imagine finding oneself in such a situation would make one quiver in one's boots.
Yeah, I think you'd be lying if you said that wasn't there, but you kind of have to just move beyond that or else you're going to be crippled with fear and you'll never be able to move your fingers on the keyboard. And he's just so great because once he gives you the keys, he really does give you the keys.
How many keys?
It's not like he had a bunch of notes and he's like, maybe we should co-write it together. It was just like he gave it his blessing and it was like, wow, like he's actually approved it. That was a great day. And then I was like, well, here we go, baby. Let's get this thing. Let's go, Hollywood.
I was struck with how faithful your film adaptation of the novella was.
Describe the adaptation process, if you please.
It was a really fun thing to adapt because it was so cinematic anyway. That's why I wanted to make it. It was already a movie in my mind. I just had to move things over here and move things over there. But he gave me such a great gift there because I was going to be able to use narration. I was going to really make it quite poetic in places. Like, that was all him. That was definitely when he invented this world. Then I just sort of did my interpretation of it where I wanted to be faithful, but also there were moments there where I also had to completely change things in order to make it a film, which is just what happens when you go from one medium to the other.
What were you absolutely insistent on including? What had to be changed or adjusted to make Mr. King's story more fitting for the silver screen?
A lot of time went into the setup of Wilfred, his son, the son's girlfriend, and just all of that rich world and the decaying nature of the marriage. But yeah, if you do go back and reread it, it actually does have quite a different sort of flow and shape, but we just had to be very streamlined because you never really even get this is a great relationship. We meet this marriage where it's already on the way out.
What did you say?
I said, leave off.
It's not great, and then it only gets less great. And then even just obviously the well, it's just so bad what happens down in that well once they do put her body down in there with the horse kicking her in the face and rats and all of this stuff. We had to be, again, very succinct in what are we able to achieve, but give it the same feeling of creepiness of what's going on down at the well. And for me, one of the non-negotiables was we absolutely need a rat coming out of her mouth. It's the visual embodiment of almost the entire movie.
Rats. It feels as if they're crawling across every frame of your film. Was working with them as nightmarish and spine-tingling as one would assume?
Yeah, it was a rat fest. We had this amazing animal wranglers in Vancouver. They're like, how many rats do you need? Okay, well, we'll get going. They bred them. They then started training them. What you see is all real rats, because again, we weren't going to be able to do fake animated rats on our budget. It wasn't ever going to look great. But then obviously the one that he stomps on, not a real rat, but that was a live grenade almost, just full of blood and guts that he has to stomp on. But yeah, what you see is that's a real rat coming out of a fake bottom half of Molly Parker's mouth, but really coming out of a mouth, and the tail. You were never going to get all that stuff if you were trying to do too much trickery. It's they had to be real proper sized rats. And yeah, there was a lot of them.
Let's talk a bit about Mr. Thomas James. This is a man who, previous to his starring role as Wilfred in 1922, had been in two other Stephen King adaptations, Dreamcatcher and The Mist.
We have to go to Derry.
How did his involvement come about?
Just really through happenstance. I never really had anyone particularly in mind. And so I was at my producer's office one day, and he was like, what do you think about Thomas James? And I was like, and he goes, yeah, I've just spoken to his agent. So next day I'm sitting across from him having lunch, and I'm just completely blown away by this guy, to the point where that lunch ended and I was just well, that's Wilfred, and it wasn't necessarily because it was his third King thing. It was just, he obviously loves King's writing, but he just got that character and he wanted to really play and explore that role.
I'm doing my best for you, son.
And he wanted to lose himself in it. And that's exactly what he did. What you see on screen is just the electricity coming out of his pores. And you look back and it's who else would have even been able to pull this off? Get lightning in a bottle like that with Thomas in this role. He is Wilfred James. He absolutely destroyed that role.
Well, Mr. Hilditch, it has been quite a pleasure speaking with you today.
Now, if you'll excuse me, I gotta go bury my wife, who I just recently murdered.
Totally.
Since Stephen King won't be born for another 25 years, it's safe to ask that irksome question asked of all authors, without the king of horror sicking his hellhounds on me. Mr. King, where oh where did you get your idea for 1922?
The original inspiration for the story is Wisconsin Death Trip. And I kept those pictures in mind, and I had done previous research and had made some previous trips through Nebraska. I love it out there in the big empty.
Wisconsin Death Trip. It's a non-fiction book published in 1973 by Michael Lisi that writer Neil Gaiman notes must have inspired as many books as it has sold. It's a compilation of 19th century photographs and news reports, most of which center around the harsh, rural life of Black River Falls, Wisconsin. By juxtaposing these news report excerpts with the stunning photographs of Charles Van Schaik, Michael Lisi aims to give us a glimpse into the past that is as much an exercise of history as it is an experiment in alchemy. See, he wants us to experience the book and the accounts within its pages as a sort of flexible mirror that connects us, the readers, to the past. His hope, then, is that we bring ourselves to the book each time we let the stories and images of the past wash over us. That may sound a little highfalutin, sure, but is there really any other way to experience a text, I ask you? Well, a text is unchanging, while it is we, readers, who change. So, what was it about this particular text, Wisconsin Death Trip, that had such a profound effect on Stephen King that he was compelled to use it as a foundational text for 1922?
I was impressed by the rural isolation of these photographs and the harshness and deprivation in the faces of many of the subject. I wanted to get that feeling in my story.
So there you have it. 1922 is the nightmarish result of two innocuous elements: Stephen King's travels to Nebraska, aka the Big Empty, and his reading of a book that deeply affected him. In many ways, the novella 1922 is an odd man out in both Full Dark No Stars as a novella collection and in Stephen King's bibliography as a whole. Stephen's generally not keen on writing period pieces. For every 11/22/63, there are, probably 10 present-day stories. In fact, 1922 is the only novella in Full Dark No Stars that isn't set in the present day, circa 2010 when it was published. It's also not set in his usual go-to main setting, but rather Nebraska, the Big Empty. 1922 is also the only novella in Full Dark No Stars told in the first person, and while this certainly isn't Stephen's first rodeo with writing from the first person point of view, the style and the voice is notably different. It's as if King is conjuring the ghosts of John Steinbeck, Flannery O'Connor, Cormac McCarthy. The change of air and voice suits him. 1922 has a mournful gravity that the other tales mostly lack. And King tells it in a precise manner that's far from his usual voice, using a Depression-era vernacular that is oddly formal, dusty even, although the story it tells is hot. While 1922 seems to stick out like a sore thumb in a collection of otherwise modern-day set novellas, its thematic concerns are very much in line with the other three stories. Aforementioned Los Angeles Times critic David L. Ulin notes that Full Dark No Stars is bleak, with an Old Testament-like sense of affliction and retribution, an assurance that every sin must be repaid. By Stephen's own admission in the afterword, the stories in this book are harsh. Indeed, 3 of the 4, including 1922, center around violence against women. 1922 has Wilfred murdering his wife, Big Driver's about a rape victim seeking revenge on a rapist, and A Good Marriage involves a wife who discovers that her husband is a serial killer of women. Stephen acknowledges.
You may have found them hard to read in places. If so, be assured that I found them equally hard to write in places.
Hard to read? No, Stephen. Not at all. Hard to read? Yes. Even harder to put down? Yes. Heck, aforementioned writer Neil Gaiman says that 1922 is simply as good as anything Stephen King's done. With 1922, King gives us a compelling tale, told by an equally compelling character. And Wilfred is all the more compelling because he's wrestling with something we've all felt. Guilt. Now granted, that's a guilt born of murdering his wife, which only, well, some of us are familiar with. But whether it's a guilt born of murder or a guilt born of cheating on your taxes, we can all relate with that feeling of being so consumed with guilt that it haunts your dreams, keeps you up at night. King says, I have tried my best in Full Dark No Stars
Your best?
to record what people might do and how they might behave under certain dire circumstances.
Losers always whine about their best. Winners go home.
Allow me to close with this somewhat macabre bit from Stephen King's Afterword.
The people in these stories are not without hope, but they acknowledge that even our fondest hopes and our fondest wishes for our fellow men and the society in which we live may sometimes be vain, often even. But I think they also say that nobility most fully resides not in success, but in trying to do the right thing. And that when we fail to do that, or willfully turn away from the challenge, hell follows.
In other words, people aren't fully good or fully evil, but all deeds have repercussions. King notes, murderers sometimes help old ladies cross the street. Papa's gotta run, baby Fred. Well, not because he feels good for what he done. No, but, well, I fear his dark deed may have shaken the fates. And I fear, well, fates ain't through with him yet. Okay, well, these folks will take the Nebraska to carry you. May the sins of the father never be visited upon the son, baby Fred. Oh. About making YouTube videos, Lloyd.
Your credits.
Yes, exactly. Nobody watches the credits. Everyone works so hard on the damn thing, but when the credits roll, viewers gotta move on to the next video faster than you could say, like our video, subscribe to our channel, and support our Patreon.
Can't live without it.
Say, Lloyd, are you a Patreon supporter of the Stephen Kingdom?
No, sir.
Oh, man, no, man. Are you missing out? For just a few bucks a month, Lloyd, you can get yourself some primo content, exclusive only to our Patreon supporters. Oh, behind-the-scenes goodies, full interviews with our guests, a genuine, one-of-a-kind letter written on the very typewriter I stole from Stephen King's house. Heck, you can even peep early cuts of episodes before they go live on YouTube. And you can get your name in the end credits. What do you think of that, Lloyd? Quite the deal, huh?
Yes, it is.
What's this here? Finest bourbon on the house?
No, sir.
Oh boy, oh boy. I've seen that gentleman before, Lloyd. This drink from him?
Yes, it is.
Getting a free drink from Death himself. What could possibly go wrong? Bottoms up.